So, welcome today to Proverbs Through the Eyes of the Living Letters. And today we're going to be starting on chapter 14. So, I'm really excited about that because we're really close to being about halfway through with the Proverbs. And for those of you that are just joining us or just watching us on YouTube, uh, we have actually been going through every single verse in the Proverbs. We've not skipped one and talked about every single one of the Proverbs. So we're actually going through it relatively slowly. And we would love for you to be a part of the classes. We have a live class that we do every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, US. And it's great to have that because not only do we take the time and you see the teaching, me teaching for those about 45 minutes or an hour that we do the teaching. But right after that's over with, we have an engagement time where everyone has an opportunity to then be able to share what the Lord showed them, ask questions. It's not just a question and answer. It's really a deep family heart-to-heart conversation after the class is over. And we want to invite you to be a part of that. Now, today, I love this because as we get towards the center of this, we have the Proverbs 31, which many of you well know about, and the Proverbs 31 woman and the expression of the Proverbs 31 woman. And here we are at chapter 14, and we begin to move into this place of the feminine aspect of a lot of things. Now, we've talked about that a lot throughout the entire time that we've gone through this. But I was really struck by this first verse in chapter 14 because it kind of ties into as we move into Proverbs 31 later on. And so for those of you that are joining us or just now joining us, we read out of both the Mishlei, and if you want to follow along with us in the Mishlei itself, Mishlei is Hebrew for Proverbs. There's a link in the description below, and you'll be able to go in and purchase those books to follow along with us through there. But I read out of both the Mishlei as well as the Passion Translation. I love Dr. Brian Simmons and the heart behind the way that he translated a lot of this, because it really begins to open up another perspective. And one of the key things that I know that Father has taught me, and the intentionality of where we go, all has to do with this place of perspective and how each one of us have a different perspective. Each one of us have a way that the Lord talks to and through us. And there's an honor of that place of how we then engage with one another and work together. And so Dr. Simmons adds just a whole nother perspective to this and allows us to see a bigger picture of what the Father is saying. But in the Mishlei, verse 1 in chapter 14 says this: "The wise among women, each builds her house, but a foolish one tears it down with her hands." In the Passion Translation, I love this because it opens up a little bit more of what this is trying to say. It says, "Every wise woman encourages and builds up her family, but a foolish woman over time will tear it down by her own actions." We can look at this from a lot of different ways. And I believe over the last, probably the last 10 years, at least from my perspective, what I have seen is a resurgence of men whose hearts are towards their children. We know that the scripture talks about this, but I'm seeing this in more than just one area. It's in multiplicity of areas. Yeah, there's still a lot of issues and that. And the reason I'm bringing that up has really to do with the wife or the woman in this case, because many times the woman being the one who is, I want to be very careful here because there are career women and there are stay-at-home moms. Each have a very difficult job to do. Staying-home moms, being able to take care of the kids and growing them up and so on, that's a difficult job. It's a more than full-time job. truth be told. And I know I could probably get a bunch of amens from all of you ladies that have had kids. And of course, you add on top of that a career and trying to raise a family and so on. That's just that much more. And so I want to be careful and not and try to make sure that you understand that I'm using generalities here in what I'm about ready to say and not trying to drive home specifics. Does that make sense? I'm talking about the intention behind the heart of what we're doing and not necessarily trying to navigate between stay-at-home moms versus career moms versus those sort of things. But historically speaking, the mother was the center of the home because generally, again, I'm talking historically here. Generally, the mother would stay at home and she would be the ones raising the children. And not that she didn't have chores or those sort of things to do around the house. I mean, come on, I grew up, so you're gonna have to forgive the picture, but I grew up as a young child watching Little House on the Prairie. All right, so when you look at the 100 years ago or so, even though the man went out and worked the field, the mama was at home, milking the cows and taking care of all the things that were right there near the house that she had to take care of, on top of taking care of the children. But I'm not talking about that aspect of it, okay? I'm talking about the intentionality of the heart, and I'm talking about more of the spiritual aspect of this, all right? So I know I spent a good little while qualifying that, but I want you to hear my heart and don't get mad at me because you think I'm saying, well, I'm being sexist. I'm not. I'm looking at the heart behind all of this. And this first verse begins to open up with every wise woman encourages and builds her family. I've seen situations where sometimes that hasn't been the case, and mamas that have torn down their children, called them stupid and that sort of thing. And it really breaks my heart. I was 22 years in the medical field, and I didn't see a lot of that. But truth be told, there were times that I would really feel for the kids in a situation. Now, most of who I took care of while I was working at the hospital were adults, but occasionally I would work with pediatrics and infants. And I could see a wide variety of issues that were going on. And it broke my heart to hear a mother, especially, and a father for that matter, tear down their child and call them stupid when they were only 4 years old and learning how to and just growing. You see what I'm saying? It's a harsh and a hard thing. And I when I look at this first, my mind instinctively goes back to those times where we did that. And funny enough, I'm not gonna lie to you. I wouldn't anyway, but and I've always been one that I share even things that hurt sometimes. I'll share those things. And I remember back years ago, especially when I was younger, that I would play around and even tell my daughter, oh yeah, oh, that's stupid. You're being stupid, that sort of thing. And Holy Spirit really got a hold of me. Now, she knew I loved her and she knew that I cared, and I wasn't calling her stupid. I was just kind of joking around with her and that sort of thing. But I began to realize that even jesting can hurt and harm, especially a young child. And Holy Spirit grabbed a hold of me and I stopped doing that. But let's take this a little bit deeper, because this scripture actually goes back to what I believe that more than likely Solomon, when he was writing these proverbs, was talking about. Because there's a place where the wife of the family, or the mother of the family, I honor my wife in the place of the sensitivity and the spiritual aspects of what she sees. She sees things that I don't, and I honor that greatly. I know that in this class, I wish she could be a part of that a lot more often than she is. But of course, she works a full-time job. I do as well, but I work more around the house than I do. So it's almost like a reversal of roles, except our daughter is grown and doesn't live at the house anymore. Uh, but I work a lot more around that. So I've got a business and several things going on as well as the ministry. And so there's a place where she has a sensitivity by the Spirit that I don't have. And I tend to be a very loving person, one who I always want to try to be a peacemaker. So I'm always trying to bring people together. I walk into a room and I'll try to find somebody who's uh, quiet, and then I'll go over and talk to them rather than going to the person that's being the most loud and most boisterous. I look for the one who doesn't have anybody to talk to, or seemingly doesn't have anybody to talk to. But with her heart and looking into that place, sometimes she's like, be careful. Be careful about that. Be careful about somebody you're talking, something going on there, because she can sense something in the spirit that I don't. And so in doing so, what she's done is built up her house. She's building her, she's encouraging and building me in that place of where I'm weak, she's strong. Now, I'm kind of going off a little bit on what I'd planned on talking about this morning. But I know that thank you for Kenneth Copeland, and because this is where I learned it from years and years ago. And of course, as I began to dive into the Hebrew and I began to see how the living letters began to express, it opened up a greater expression of what I'm about ready to say. And that is that the male and female coming together as one, and that when God separated, if you will, took the rib out of Adam and formed Eve, that there wasn't a one above the other, it was an absolute equality. And I even go to the place of the way that I like to describe it is in saying that there the feminine part of man was removed, and it was used to form the woman, but the two had been one before. And so where the man was strong, the woman was weak. But where the woman was strong, the man was weak. Are you following me? And so it's not about, and this is what the Lord started messing with me, it's not about trying to blast our differences. You know, when Michelle and I were young married, you know, there was a lot of up and down initially in that place of, you know, of learning one another and loving one another even more, and in maturity and into maturity, that there were times that we'd have silly little arguments about, why aren't you strong in this area? And Father began to mess with me and say, well, you know, you're strong in an area because you're the one that's meant to carry that. And in the place where she is strong, she is meant to carry that. Now, the Mishlei goes into a story here, and it talks about a gentleman by the name of On. And On had actually connected in with Korach, or Korah. Many of us in the United States will call him Korah. If you remember the story, Korah was the one who came before Moses, and he said, I'm the one that should have been placed as Kohen Gadol, or the high priest. And remember, when you go back to the scripture, we see where God had set Moses up in a very specific way. And as a matter of fact, the scripture goes on to say that in a sense, to the people of Israel, Moses was like God to the people of Israel. And Aaron, his brother, was to be the Kohen Gadol, or the high priest. And Korah was like, no, I'm the one that should be the high priest. And he came against Moses. And if you remember the story, it goes on to say how the Lord said, the Moses came to the Lord, he says, you know, told him to do some things, and he would prove to them who the Kohen Gadol, or the high priest, was supposed to be. And if you remember, this is where Moses spoke, and when he did, the earth split open, and it swallowed up not only Korah and his family, but also those 250 men that had joined along with them. And they were swallowed up completely by the earth, and then the earth shut back over top of them. And so the story goes with the wife of On, who, knowing what was going on and wanting to protect her family, wanting to protect her husband, she goes and she gets him drunk. She gives him a lot of strong wine, and she makes him drunk so that he's laid out in the house and not doing anything and not being able to go anywhere. Knowing that the men that were with Korah would come to him and say, "Hey, come on, join us with Korah as we confront Moses about the position of the high priest." And what happens is that not only does she get her husband drunk so that he's passed out asleep in the house, she also knows that through the Jewish law, or the proper protocol of approaching a home, that they would not approach the home if her hair was uncovered. So there was a place and a protocol of the fact that if she was not covered up, then they would not approach the house. So she made sure that she did not put on her garb, and that she let her hair down on purpose, because as they saw that, they would stay away from the home. And so in doing so, she protected her husband and saved him. He was not one of the ones that went down into the pit when the earth itself opened up and closed back over top of it. So you can see where this heart of one of the things that it took me I'm not going to lie, it took me a long time to figure out, was that sensitivity of my wife, and to learn how to honor that sensitivity. I didn't always do that when I was younger. But as I got older and I began to see her heart and see the sensitivity that she had, I began to honor that more and more. And that's exactly what this is talking about. Because see, a foolish woman will tear it down by her own actions over time. And those ladies that I was talking about that at the hospitals where they were calling their kids stupid and so on, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So I hope you're hearing my heart, because this is kind of a tough subject when you think about it, but yet it's one that needs to be addressed and not be afraid to address, because it's a place where both the man and the woman are responsible for this. But this verse is speaking specifically to you ladies. Verse 2, in the Mishlei, it says this: one who walks in his uprightness fears Hashem, or fears the Lord, but he who is perverse in his ways scorns him. The Passion Translation says this: lovers of truth follow the right path because of their wonderment and worship of God, but the devious display their disdain for him. So if you start to kind of go along with what we've done over the last, Lord, how long have we been doing this now? Almost a year? No, 8 months, 9 months? Is it a year now since we started the I can't remember. I know it's been a while, so 9 months, 10 months. It's probably been pretty close to a year now. We've moved through this place of talking about the fear of the Lord. And we talked about how, many of us know the scripture that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. There's another place in scripture where it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And we begin to see different aspects of this. Like right now, this verse is essentially saying that the fear of the Lord is in that place of following the right path, or as the Mishlei talks it, walks in righteousness or uprightness. And so the question is, well, how does that work? Especially now. I don't know about you guys, but I know in a lot of the circles where I am, there's a lot of talk about this place of not being bound by the religious aspect of the law itself. And I agree with that. I do not want to be bound by the law. When Yeshua died on the cross, he brought us into this place of not being under the law, but under grace. Paul talks about that very well and very deeply in that expression. And I still really do not believe that we have the real understanding of what that really means. Those of you that have been with us a while have heard me say that when we talk about righteousness, righteousness is a yes or a no. It's a given. It was given through the blood of Yeshua. So what do I mean by that? Well, if he fulfilled the righteous requirements of the law and his death on the cross took and covered them with his blood, then those things are no longer something that need to be dealt with, not the righteous requirement of the law. And so from that perspective, the blood of Yeshua took care of that. But I've got another side of that argument that says, well, hold on a minute. Okay, yes, righteousness is a yes or a no, but righteousness also has a responsibility. And I talk about it, especially as I talk about like my wife and I and our relationship. I can tell my wife all day long that I love her, but unless I do something that shows that I love her, then all she will think is that I'm just saying it and it's a bunch of lip service. In other words, there has to be an expression of that in the day to day. There has to be an action that goes along with that. I believe that righteousness is the same way. But it's not because I have to, but because I want to. When I love my wife, not only am I going to tell her I love her, but I'm going to do something that shows that I love her. Does that make sense? And so it's again, it's not because I have to, because if I stop and think about the logic behind I have to do that, then I'm really doing it with no feeling and no real love. But when I want to do it because I love her, then that's a whole nother ballgame. I'm expressing it in both thought and deed, word and action. Make sense? And so I want to kind of look at this perspective, because one of the things, especially over the last, I don't know, probably 6 months or more, probably even longer than that, one of the things that the Father has taken me into more and more is this place of intentionality. Funny enough, we were talking about that before we started the class today. And intentionality in the sense of knowing where we're going and what we're doing. Now, that's kind of a misnomer because I know I've been through a situation over the last 4 or 5 weeks that kind of really made me very, very focused about some things. And one of the things that I began to think about as I was going through that, I wanted to make sure, the reason I got focused was I wanted to make sure that my responses were right. I wanted to make sure that I didn't allow a root of bitterness to come in, or didn't allow thoughts that took me away from what I know that the Father had told me. And he's told me that in the place of adversity, in the place of what we call difficulties, in the place where there are struggles, it's not of the devil, always. All right. It's not necessarily always of the devil. And that Father himself will take us through to reveal something inside of us that we didn't know was there. In other words, we learn to overcome. And one of the biggest things that I've probably spoken more than anything is the heart of the overcomer, and the place of really, the scripture doesn't tell us to be perfect. Although I know some of you can probably look up the scripture and says, be perfect as I am perfect, right? Well, that word in the Hebrew literally means mature, not perfection. Describe perfect to me. Selah. Because perfection will be different to every one of us. Our perspective of perfection will be different, but maturity is in learning how to respond to something. So my focus was just that, about the place of making sure that my heart response was right. But in doing so, sometimes I didn't necessarily know exactly where something was going. I couldn't always see the direct path. What I could see was my next step, but I couldn't really see past that next step. Does that make sense? And so in during those times, I would stop and I would think, okay, let me make this deliberate next step because I know what the next step is supposed to be. And I would just take one step at a time, sometimes one day at a time, from just a single step every single day. But it was progress forward. Those of you that have been with us a while might remember that I always talked about walking through the orach, that deep path that Father sometimes takes us on, and where the trees are over, the mesquite trees are over the path itself, and there's a path through the trees, but you have to be very careful as you walk along and to follow the Lord as he takes you one step at a time. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about when I say mesquite trees, if you've ever been to West Texas and you've ever seen a mesquite tree, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Imagine a tree that's branches, even its little itty bitty tiny branches, are so hard and so firm that you just walk by them and they don't give. And when they do, they will cut the ever living tar out of you. And so they can be pretty brutal walking through them. So if you now you get a little bit more of the picture of what I'm talking about. So lovers of truth will follow that. Why? Because they love the Father. You remember we just got done talking about that in the verse before. That heart of loving the Father, not because we have to, because the Bible tells us to, because there's a path that we know that is right, and we know that the Bible is almost like a map, or if you will, or a treasure map of taking us into this. But it's not because we have to, but because we want to, and because we love the Father. We worship him and want to do and want to be. It's not so much about a do. You guys have heard me say that. We've talked about it in here. It's not about a do, it's about a being, right? And so when I love the truth and I love how the Father has revealed that truth to me, I'm going to walk along this path. But when we start talking about the devious, when we start talking about someone who's not wanting to follow along with that path, the devious will display their disdain for God because they'll almost stay they will not almost they'll stay away from the expression of what the Father is trying to do in something, or better yet, they'll almost they will show the place of seeing themselves as being the one who makes the ultimate decision. I don't know if I'm articulating that like I really want to right there. Because the truth is that we do have the choice in everything that we do. The only word that keeps coming to my mind as I'm trying to articulate this is hubris. That place of being so egotistical that the person sees themselves as being God, equal with God. I know we have talked about that, and I know that Father has made me a part of him and he is a part of me. But I'm nothing without Father. I am complete and full in him. If you can go there, that's exactly the reason why the male and female started as one and then were separated. There's more to that story than just the fact that there was a place where man should not be alone. If you can go there with me, the Father was saying as well, I no longer want to be alone. And through man and woman, he began to show the place of his own heart and say, I want you to be a part of me. John chapter 17, Yeshua's prayer as he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane right before he was about ready to be crucified. And what did he say? Father, that they may be one, just as you and I are one, us in them and them in us. It was the expression of the heart of the Father from the beginning. Now, I know in Western terms, we call it the bride of Christ, or the place of the bride of Christ. When I like to teach it and explain it, it's like, and I know this may stretch some of you with what I'm about ready to say. It's like the Lord is saying, you complete me and I complete you. The argument I've given on this before has been, remember, as many of us will probably remember years ago, someone would come up to us and say, there's a God-shaped hole inside of you that only he can fill. And as the Father began to take me through and began to teach me this, there was a question that began to come up in my heart and in my mind that I've asked him. And he took me to John 17 with the answer. And that is this: if there is a God-shaped hole inside of me that only you can fill, Father, is there a man-shaped hole inside of you that only we can fill? Selah. I'm not going to answer that on purpose. I want Holy Spirit to reveal to you the answer as he's expressing it to you. But truth be told, I've already given the answer, and that's John chapter 17. Proves the point of what I'm trying to make there. Do you realize how important we are to Father? Selah. And when, as one who doesn't love the Lord and one who wants to do their own thing, or as the chapter or verse 2 says, the devious display their disdain for him, they basically say, I don't need you. I don't need you, God. Now, there's a really deep way that I could explain all of this. Don't have time in here in the class right now. And to me, it made sense as I began to see it that way. And I began to understand how that when looking at it from this devious part of the scripture, I began to see how people could do the heinous things that they do. Because when we look around in the earth, we're like, how do people do those things? How can they do those things? This helped me make a little bit of sense to it. At least it helped me in that sense. But it gave me a way of then avoiding that place of breaking or becoming devious or if you will, veiling off my heart away from the Lord. That's a good way of putting it right there. Verse 3. Verse 3 in the Mishlei says this: in the mouth of a fool is the staff of pride, but the lips of the wise will protect them. Dr. Simmons writes, the words of a proud fool will all come back to haunt him, but the words of the wise will become a shield of protection around them. Now, I want to go back to that story I was telling you a little bit ago in talking about the difficulties that I was walking through over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And one of the things that he had me do was get very, very focused. For me, the expression of what I'm talking about is focused is that I get quiet, even with my wife. And so she doesn't always like that. And I don't always like to do that either. But sometimes I'm really focused in this place of wanting to make sure that my responses are right and that I'm seeing something. I remember years ago where the Lord really gave me these 2 questions that became 3 questions. But these 2 questions that have been a cornerstone of helping me along the path of this. And that is, what do you see and how do you see it? Those 2 questions helped me because once I answered the question of what it was that I was seeing, I would have to ask the question right behind that, how do I see it? Or how do I respond to what I see? In doing so, it brought about an intentionality that helped me to then respond to something, and hence the place of where the focus came into play. Later on, the Lord added in a third question that I always go through, but I don't always share the details behind that one, because sometimes that's a very personal and private thing. But the third question is, well, why do I see it that way? And I ask the question of myself, why are you seeing it the way that you see it? And how is it that you can change, especially if you recognize that the way that you've seen it before is the old religious way that you used to do it, and you're coming away from that old religious way of seeing and doing it, and you're beginning to look at it from a new way and a new perspective. You following me? Hence the reason for the why. But when we look at this place, it's almost as if the Mishlei kind of talks about this, where he talks about how the tongue itself, especially of a proud fool, almost becomes like a staff. It's like it's kind of like what James talked about when he talked about the tongue being a rudder. Remember James chapter 1, where it talks about that the tongue is the smallest member amongst all the parts, but it guides everything that the body does. Just like a rudder is very small against a large ship, but that rudder will actually steer the vessel in the way that it's supposed to go. So we're looking at this aspect of this, and the proud fool will begin to spout off these things about their own pride and how they can do this and they can do that, and they're doing it all on their own, absent of God, and blah 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 blah, and even begin to try to show themselves in a higher place than they ought. Or the scripture talks about being careful not to think of yourself more highly than you ought. It's really speaking about the place of humility. But it's funny, because one of the questions that I ask a lot is, do you know how powerful you are? Do you really know the strength of what the Father has given you? Do you realize the power in the words that you speak, and the intention of your heart has the ability to bring in what seems to be from nowhere or nothing, and brings it into existence and tangibility on the earth? Hebrews chapter 11. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And that which was created was made by, actually that's John chapter 1. But the things that were created by were made by the things which are not seen. So how does all that come into play? Well, thank you for the quantum realm. And I don't want to get too deep into that, because now we understand a little bit more about the quantum realm, and we begin to realize that the quantum realm is a place where there are particles, but those particles are waiting for a frequency and a vibration of the sound of our mouth and the words that we speak. And as we do, those particles begin to vibrate, and they become tangible in the earth. In other words, this quantum realm is the realm of, if you will, faith, where now we have a scientific basis for that. Faith has always been that place of us believing something, right? And I agree with that. Faith has always been more of a spiritual concept, and it still is. Do not think that I'm detracting from the spiritual aspect of what faith is and what it's talking about. However, because of this place of the understanding of the quantum realm that we're beginning to have now, we can see the connection. And in seeing the connection, we realize how powerful we are. That makes sense? So, and here I am talking about hubris or pride at the same time of saying, do you know how powerful you are? Well, do you know how powerful Yeshua was? Do you know when he laid hands on the sick and watched them recover? And he would He raised Lazarus from the dead, and all the miracles that he did, turning the water into wine, and the myriad of other other miracles that he did that aren't even written down in the scripture itself. He was bringing about and showing us something that had always been there. That power had always been resident inside of us. I believe that with every ounce of my being. I believe that had always been true. But it took Yeshua to bring us back to that place of recognizing, okay, wait a minute. Because you did this, greater works can we do, because it's always been inside of us. So humility in that place, would you say that Yeshua was one of the most humble people that you would know? There were times that to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, he seemed like he was a pompous fool to confront them. But what was he doing? He was confronting them with the logic of their own lie, and how the logic behind the way that they saw things was a lie. And he confronted them with the truth. And that truth began to change everything. And so humility is a part of that. Why? Father has given me a power that he hasn't given any of you. But Father has given you a power that only you have. Do you realize the treasure that you are? But in doing so, just like I was talking about with husbands and wives earlier, in the place of where I'm weak, my wife is strong, but where I'm strong, my wife is weak. And I learned to allow her to do those things that she is strong in, because it helps us walk through a situation, and she lets me handle those things that I'm strong in. How much more so in this place, as we come together as family, as echad, as one in the Lord, then there is a place of me honoring you and the expression of what you do, so that you can accomplish the goal that you meant to. You are strong in an area that I'm weak, and I need you. And then you were like, this is where humility comes together. Because remember, Paul talked about this when he said, every joint supplies. And so there's an equality. There is a connection. There is a place of us expressing in the earth the beautiful body of Christ, or as I like to call it, the diamond of Yahweh. For those of you that are just now listening and may not know what I'm talking about, I do have a featured video in our YouTube channel called The Diamond of Yahweh. And if you want to know more about what I just said and how it fits together with this, watch that video. I'm telling you, it's going to open up a whole nother, it's a metaphor and an analogy that really begins to open up the heart and expression. But it's a beautiful one because it allows us to see the depth of what Father is saying there. So the proud fool will come back to haunt him. In other words, he's going to spout all these things off, and it's going to come back to eventually haunt them, whether it's a lie or whatever it is. But the words of the wise will become a shield of protection around them. The words that we speak, and the place of the expression of our heart and the intention of our heart, and that place where we have recognized that our words are powerful, our words become a place of a strong tower. Now, I know you're saying, well, wait a minute, isn't the name of the Lord a strong tower? Yes, very much so. The name of the Lord is a strong tower where the righteous run in and are saved. But let's remember who the name of the Lord. We're talking about Yeshua here. And so he is the word made flesh, just as we are the word made flesh. And as we hear his words and we speak his words and we learn and we make them a part of them, not just to be able to do it. Oh, I hope I'm getting this across here today. Not just in being able to do it, but in this place of wanting to be it, wanting to to say, Lord, I want to be so much a part of you and know your heart so well, understand my part of your wisdom that you have given me so well that wisdom, the wisdom that you've given me becomes second nature, becomes first nature, however you want to put it. It becomes my automatic response in everything. And that includes the words that I speak. And so from that place, your words become a place where there's a tower built around us, or if you will, a protection, a guard, a fence around us, because the truth will guard us and protect us in that place. We recognize the heart of the Father and his love for us, and we recognize how powerful we are. But at the same time, how humble we need to be as we honor one another. So I hope that's clear, because I need to move on. All right, verse 4. In the Mishlei, it says this: where there are no oxen, the trough is clean, but an abundance of crops comes through the strength of an ox. I love the way that Dr. Simmons says this in the Passion Translation. The only clean stable is an empty stable. So if you want the work of an ox, and to enjoy an abundant harvest, you'll have a mess or two to clean up. Agreed. Think about it. Now, it's funny because you can actually see this from two different ways. You can actually see this where if you've got oxen that are out working the field, you get the picture of where the oxen at the end of the night come back home, and they have their fodder laid out. They have all the stuff that they need, the water and so on. And of course, as a result of that, they're going to be a mess or two that's going to come as a result of all of that. The Mishlei kind of looks at it from both perspectives of not only saying that if you've got a place where you've got the oxen out and you're doing something, realize you're going to have a mess or two to clean up. And that should be a joyous thing, because we recognize that there's going to be an abundance of the place of us going out and then completing that work. But it's funny, one of the other commentators looked at it from the perspective of, well, instead of the clean stable being a negative, kind of, he was looking at it from the perspective of when the oxen are actually out in the field, their food is going to be what they are able to glean themselves out in the field. And so this first verse here actually refers to the place of there being the abundance because the stable is clean. That makes sense? I know that sounds kind of weird. You're like, wait a minute, I've always seen this verse as the way I first took it. And that is that if you've got a clean stable, it's because the cows are just sitting there. There's not a whole lot going on. There's not going to be as much mess. But this other commentator looked at it of, well, a clean stable is actually a sign of the fact that they're out working and doing something. And they're making the mess more out there than they are in the stable itself. So you remember those two questions? What do you see and how do you see it? Do you see how this becomes a way of really teaching us the place of looking beyond? It's one of the things that as the Lord began to reveal to me the Hebrew Living Letters, was he began to teach me that from a Western mindset, we always want to try to say that this means this. But from the Hebraic, when you have a pictorial language or a concept language, in other words, a letter and a word are more than just what something is or an identity or a name of something. It's a concept behind it that speaks of a action or a thought or a deed or whatever the case may be. And of course, when we dig down into the Hebrew Living Letters, we begin to see how this picture begins to expand, because the Hebrew letters can't be an A means A and A means apple. It's far beyond that. Aleph speaks of Father himself. And it's in Aleph that I begin to see the fullness of his promises and the fullness of his word. And funny enough, one of the Hebrew words for oxen is olive. It speaks, and it's one of the pictures behind olive is an oxen. And it's talking about, but it talks about not only the place of strength and the place of being able to get something done. It also speaks about the heart of getting something done in the first place. So you can see how suddenly now one thing doesn't mean just this; it means a myriad of other things. And the Lord is walking us through this place of looking beyond to see from different perspectives. Because by doing so, we begin to understand more. And we begin to see how things work together better. And so if you want to work if you want the work of an ox and to enjoy an abundant harvest, you'll have a mess or two to clean up. So either way that we look at this, either heart behind it, it's the heart of doing something. It's the heart of, oh, help me out here, Holy Spirit. I keep going back to this place of doing. And again, you got to go back to what I said earlier. Why are we doing it? Because we have to, or because we want to? Because we love the Lord with all of our heart, our mind, our soul, and our strength, right? Which means that there is action behind what it is that we're doing, or we're doing it just to check a box and say it's done. Selah. Selah on that one. Verse 5. A trustworthy witness will not deceive, but a spouter of deceptions is a false witness. Dr. Simmons writes it this way: an honest witness will never lie, but a deceitful witness lies with every breath. I don't know about you, but I've known people that in some cases had absolutely no reason to lie, but yet would lie anyway. Sometimes I've seen that as a place where they're doing it as a way of making themselves look bigger and better than someone else. In other words, to create a type of a hierarchy where that I'm above and you're below kind of thing. The heart of contempt and looking down at someone. But I love the word here that they use, because he's talking about the place of an honest witness will never lie. When we look at the Hebrew word for witness, this has been one that's really messed with me a lot. And I'm about ready to wrap this up here in just a moment. It's really messed with me a lot because it's only a 2-letter root word, and it's the Hebrew word ed. And it's spelt ayin dalet. Ayin is a letter that means much, much more than this, but it speaks about revelation and seeing through the eyes of the Lord and seeing the way that he sees things. But it also means much, much more than that. Dalet is a letter that speaks about a door. And so it speaks about that place of crossing over, if you will, from one place into another, from one dimension into another, from one room into another. But when we talk about a door, we also have to think about, well, are we talking about a closed door, which means that which behind it is hidden? Or are we talking about an open door where we can see through into the other room and be able to see what's there? So there's a lot of different ways that you can see when you think about a door. And when you take these 2 letters, there's another little secret that I like to share, and I'm going to share with you guys today. And that is that in Hebrew, when you look at a trilateral root, which means a trilateral root or tri-letter root is a Hebrew word that has 3 letters. When you see that, it speaks about the place of actual. In other words, it's the place of something becoming tangible, or the place of the transition of it becoming tangible. Whenever you see a two-letter or bilateral root, it actually speaks about the place of potential. So, in other words, a bilateral root, in order to be brought into tangibility in the earth, will change from a two-letter to a three-letter or more. All right. So, what does that mean? When you speak about the place of potential, you begin to see where the heart and the intention of your heart, along with your choices, this is getting a little bit deep here, is in a state of potential. But as you speak, if you will, it's like adding a living letter hey to the end of the Hebrew word ed. And hey is a letter that speaks about framing something or bringing into tangibility. I love it because to me, hey is a letter that speaks of pregnancy. And so it's talking about how the mama is holding that baby. The baby is already forming, but it's still inside of mama and being protected inside of mama until the time that the birth takes place. So it's actually an actual, because the child has been born, but there's a process of growing in maturity. And so that process of childbirth will bring that child to where we can actually touch that child in the tangibility on the outside of the mother's womb. The child is still tangible inside of the mother's womb, but I'm talking about what others can then join in and be able to hold that child as well. So my heart behind this is saying this: an honest witness, one who looks at things and asks those questions. Well, what do I see? How do I see it? Father, I want to see through your eyes and through your heart. And so in that place, as we are telling the truth by what we see out of the heart of the Father, not because we have to, but because, and try to spout, I'm going to get myself in trouble. Not because of spouting scriptures, because we know it's the right thing to do and blah, 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 but because we really do understand it in our heart, that honest witness will never lie. I love this. The other day I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he really said something that just shook me, because I never saw prophecy from this perspective. And I began to realize that I had an old religious way of looking even to what prophecy is. And he said this: prophecy is not foretelling the future. The heart of prophecy is truth. It's the telling of the truth, period. From a Western perspective, we've turned it into God's going to do this, and there's been a lot of, if you will, almost spiritual fortune telling that's going on. And when we look back in scripture, many times the prophets, when they would go to people, it would be in a confrontation saying, hey, if you go this path, this is going to happen. And they would tell the truth and tell the truth. I love Jeremiah, because I mean, he did something I would never even dream of doing. Strap on a diaper and wear it for 3 years and never change it, and go to the bathroom in it. Talk about a raw rear end. I would not want to be being Jeremiah and walking around in a diaper. But what he was expressing was the truth. And he was, by this dirty diaper, he was declaring to Israel at that time, hey, y'all are like this dirty diaper right here. And the truth is that we are Israel. So that dirty diaper has been me in the past. I've been the one that was expressing the dirty diaper. You following me? And so I love that confrontation of the truth. So an honest witness will never lie. One who tells the truth and witnesses with the Father himself. He sees through the eyes of the Father, and he allows himself to be an open door and express the heart of the Father will never lie. But a deceitful witness lies with every breath. one who tries to deceive, one who tries to make themselves look haughtier than they are, or bigger than they are, or whatever the case may be, will lie with every single breath. Father, I don't even want to accidentally do that. And I thank you that you've begun to teach me in letting go of those old religious ways that I've always seen things. Begin to see through your eyes and through your heart. Father, just as Yeshua was in the earth, let me too be an open door of your light into the earth. Let me be a conduit of your Shekinah, your presence, your Shekinah glory and presence in the earth. That, Father, that as sons, together as sons, we are like a city that's set up on a hill that cannot be hidden. And all will come to the light that they see, because they see the light in the city where we are. And the sun never goes down there. Oh, I know some of you are like, oh, wait a minute. Now you're talking revelations and stuff that hasn't even happened yet. Says who? Says who? If the light is in us and we are in the light, just as he is in the light, and the light is in us, does the sun ever go down on that place of the city of who we are? You answer that question. You following me? Father, I want to thank you for your word today. I want to thank you for the expression of looking into some of these things that sometimes they're hard to talk about, but we have to talk about them, because in doing so, we can see past where we are right now, look past those old religious ways, and to see into the place of your heart. I love the Living Letter of Lamed. And part of the reason I love the Living Letter of Lamed 4 is because Lamed means learning and teaching, but it means more than that. The Lord gave me a picture of his heart. And Lamed is the letter that begins the Hebrew word for heart, which is Lev. And what I saw was how those two connected into Psalm 91. And so when I step into the place of being in his heart, I'm stepping into the place of Psalm 91. Yeshab Sater Leon Batzal Shaddai Eat Lanan. He who sits in the secret place of the heart of the Father, shall abide under the shadow. The shadow is the very heart and the expression of being in his heart and feeling his heartbeat, understanding the way he's seen. Because when he took me into this, he took me to the place where I walked into the place of his heart, and then I began to grow, almost like I was standing on the septum of his heart, and I rose up to be able to see actually through his eyes, my feet being here and my eyes being right behind his eyes. And the first thing that I saw as I began to look through his eyes, this was an encounter that I had with the Lord. First thing that hit me was the love that he has for people. Because the first person that I saw was somebody that really didn't like me. And truth be told, I really didn't care too much for them either. But when I saw that person through the eyes of the Lord, it broke me. It broke my heart. And I realized I can't be the way that I've been towards them. I really believe that I had walked away and not said things that I should have on purpose, because I wanted to express the love of the Father even before that. But this love went even deeper than just trying to avoid a confrontation. And so, Father, I thank you that you've given us this place of your heart. And in this heart, in your heart is the shadow of the Almighty. And that, Father, in that place, we are a part of that city. The light never goes down in the city of our hearts. And the city of our hearts as we join together into the city of God. And so it's from this place that I speak this blessing. Ivarechecha Adonai v'ishmerecha. Ye'er Adonai panav alecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and to be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face, turn his countenance, turn his presence. Because that word panim there, or panecha, means just that. It means all of those. Turn his presence towards you and give you the fullness of his peace, the closeness of his relationship, and the expression of light in you, so that you are no longer a human. You are a light being. You are a light expression of the Father. Yes, we still have the flesh, but even that light of the Father exudes through that place of our flesh, so that when someone sees us, all they see is the light of the Father in that place. Blessings and shalom.